Fairy Sightings podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. And I am absolutely thrilled to introduce Tiyi Schippers, a songwriter, poet, musician, author, and lifelong experiencer of the other worlds. And welcome, Tiyi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here speaking with you this evening.
Yeah, for me too. We've been talking for some time, and I know that, one of your beautiful experiences is in my book. And that was a great honor, really, to be able to talk to you about that. And, we've been talking for some time about some of, your experiences, but also, your ancestry and what you're able to pass down to your grandchildren too, which is very precious. And so we're going to get into all that tonight. But it'd be great just to start with, if you could describe to people where you're living in the US and a little about yourself.
Sure. So I live in northern Lower Michigan, about 40 minutes from Lake Michigan. I live in a small city that is right on the edge of the Manistee National Forest, which is thousands and tens of thousands of acres of wilds and rivers and lakes. And I live in a beautiful, beautiful place. And right now, we live so far north that spring is just happening. So the leaves have just come out and unfurled, and the crabapple tree behind me is still blooming, and the world smells like spring. It's lovely here. So, and I'm in my city. I'm actually the mayor of my city as well, yes, and have been a community activist and artist and performer and for forever, and also somebody who has grown up in tune with things beyond what we see with our eyes. And I learned this early on. Well, my earliest memories are, I grew up in my great-grandmother's house, and my great-grandmother was Annie Murphy Lyons. And Annie Murphy Lyons was gifted the house by her mother as a wedding present in the end of the 19th century. And when she was in her 90s, she went to a care home, and we rented the house from her. And that house was filled with spirits of all kinds. I've written about that in one of my books, but that's neither here nor there. But growing up in that, so my father's family is of Irish heritage. Annie Lyons, Grandma Lyons, we called her, she swore that she was able to marry her husband, my great-grandfather, as a gift, as a wish granted by a leprechaun. Mm-hmm. She has a whole story that has been passed down, how the leprechaun, she knew her, she was born in Chicago, and her family experienced the Great Chicago Fire. And then their house was one that survived, and you can read about the Murphy house in books and historical documents that they were able to save their house. But after the fire, she and her mother went to Ireland to live with her grandmother for quite some time before coming back to America, where she married Tommy Lyons, who she was bound and determined to marry. And the only way that was going to happen was from a wish from a leprechaun, because he was in Chicago and she was in County Cork at her grandmother's farm. And so she was coming back one evening, on a Sunday evening, hot. She hated the heat, walking along, and she stopped to rest underneath a big tree, she said a giant oak tree. And she leaned up against it and took off her shoes and stockings, against the rules at that time, and fell asleep. And when she woke up, there was a little man standing in front of her. And he was not teeny little man. He was about the size of a small child.
Yeah.
And he was standing there leaning on a shillelagh and looking altogether unhappy with her, and just kind of glaring at her there. And she woke up startled. She says, "Oh my goodness, I didn't, somebody was there." And he says, "What'll you be doing by me tree?" And she said, "Oh, I didn't know this was your property. I thought this belonged to the O'Briens or whomever it was." And he said, "I didn't say it was me property. I said it was me tree." So then she looked at him, and she had been told by her grandmother that you can spot one of the fair folk because they won't have a button or a buckle. And his clothing was old and handmade. And she looked at him, and she also was told that the only way to catch a leprechaun is to look him square in the eye and say, "I know who you are, and I'll be having my wishes."
Oh.
And that's just what she did. And she said, I remember as a little child sitting at her knee and her telling the story with the shillelagh in her hand. I have it right here. This is the shillelagh. That was my great grandmother's. It was passed down to my grandmother, then my father, and then me. Each generation, that's the keeper of the story. And she said that looking in his eyes was, she had so many butterflies because it was like looking into eternity. It was looking into all the light of heaven and the fires of hell all at once. And you want to look away, but she knew that she couldn't look away. And so she wished to marry Tommy Lyons. And he said to her, "Oh, you're a foolish lass, you're a fine looking girl. Just, all you have to do is bat your eyes and you can have any lad." And she says, "You don't understand. He lives all the way across the ocean in America." And he said, "It's still foolish because you can wish for marriage, but you can't wish for love." And she said, "You take care of the marrying part and I'll take care of the loving part." That's their exact line. And so he said, "Your wish is granted. Now let me go." And she says, "Just a minute. I know I have other wishes." But she knew her first wish, so she didn't have to think. But now she had to be mindful because sometimes you make a wish, she said, and it's a wish that ends up coming back at you in a very bad way. And so she thought for a minute, and she just glanced away for a second, and he blew up dust in her eyes. And when she rubbed her eyes, he was gone. He had disappeared. There were fields all around. She couldn't find him anywhere. But there on the ground was his shillelagh. She ran home. Her mother scolded her for being barefoot. Her grandmother said, "Come and let me see that." And they put a metal piece on the end from a tin can on the end of the shillelagh, because that way he couldn't just come back and spirit it away.
Right.
Because he couldn't take the metal with him.
Yeah.
And her grandmother, which would have been my great grandmother, told her, "You keep that shillelagh with you, because as long as you have it, he's going to be coming back to try to get it back. And as long as he's coming back to try to get it back, you have more chances to catch him again and get your other wishes."
Oh, fabulous
So
story.
So this is a story that I grew up with. And my great grandmother did not make things up. She did not lie. As a matter of fact, on her deathbed, she asked for a priest to confess, because when she was a young woman in Chicago, she got change back from the streetcar, and it was a penny more than she deserved. And she knew it, and she didn't give it back, and she knew that that was a sin, and she wouldn't do it. And she also said to us that a leprechaun can never lie because they're immortal, and the only thing that will kill an immortal soul or a mortal soul is a lie. Mm. So and the way she told it, and she told it over, and then my father would tell it to us. And we all we knew that these folks were part of our family, that whoever this one belonged to is part of our family and has come with us here and is part of the magic that that I grew up with, that my children and my nieces and nephews grew up with, and now my grandchildren. And we tell the story every year. It's a part of our St. Patrick's Day celebration. We do a children's parade here on my block, It's just everybody decorates and just walks up a short block. All the little children come out, and we close the street and play music and just celebrate. And the parade marshal, whoever is the child that gets to carry the shillelagh each year, it's a very special thing. So we have a fairy relic in our family, and that's it for generations. Also in that house, it was haunted. And my earliest memories were hearing voices calling my name in my ear. And I wasn't frightened by it. It was just all part of, when you're a toddler and you're learning the nature of the world, you're learning that's a dog, that's a car, whatever, and this is whatever this is. But it was part of the natural world. There were some things that happened that were frightening, startling, but it was all just part of the natural world. And when we talked about the things that happened, there was one spirit in particular that every night we'd see her. We called her the Slinky Lady because she was made of light. And Slinkies are those spring toys, from the middle of the last century where I was born. And when she moved, the front of her would move and the back would slowly catch up with all these steps. So we would watch her. And when she was out of the doorway, we knew it was safe to get up and go to the bathroom or whatever. And all of my siblings and I experienced this collectively together. When we told my mother this stuff, when we were small, she would say, "Oh, your eyes are playing tricks on you," or whatever. But she, at the same time, she told us that because she didn't want us to be frightened. As soon as we moved out, we all shared the stories that we all experienced and acknowledged it. But my grandmother, who lived next door in a little bungalow right next to our house, she told my mother, "Oh, that's Pa," or "That's, you don't worry about it." And so everyone just acknowledged spirits. When my grandmother died, I remember being in her kitchen and a can, she loved this can, it was terrible stuff, canned chicken a la king. And a can of chicken a la king just came off the shelf and fell upside down. And we were all at her house waiting that my father and his brother were at the hospital, and all the aunts and uncles and children were all at her house. And when the chicken a la king can fell, my great uncle Tom said, "Mark the time, she's dead." And somebody wrote down the time, and everybody just said, "Rest her soul," and lifted a glass. And so they were aware of signs and acknowledging that there are signs. Now that's my father's family. My mother's family, on the other hand, are Creole from New Orleans. And they were, our oldest relative that we found was from 1702 that had come from Haiti after the slave riots in Haiti to New Orleans. And these were the people of color. So my grandfather, as a child on my mother's side, they did what's called passe blanche, which means passing for white. They were mixed race and not too dark skinned. My great grandfather, his sisters had moved to Chicago, and they wrote to him and said they were living in a Greek neighborhood where everyone was darker skinned than they were, and they were all treated like they were white. So my great grandfather, Joseph, and his wife Onelia took their 4 little boys, and at night they couldn't tell anyone they were leaving. They could take only what they could carry. They had a home there that was a generational home that they had to walk away from, because this was at the time of Jim Crow in the United States, which was really violently imposed segregation. And my great-grandfather was a businessman. He was a cigar maker, a pretty famous cigar maker. And when the segregation laws came in, he was not allowed to go and pick his own tobacco anymore, to choose his tobacco anymore. He had to wait and be given what was left over. And so he wasn't able to keep his business up. So they got on the train in the quote unquote colored section in New Orleans. And what I learned later, I always thought that the colored section, that's what it was called at the time, was a separate passenger car. It was not. It was benches in the baggage car. And they sat on wooden benches in the baggage car and took the train to St. Louis. Then they got off the train in St. Louis. They spent an afternoon, hours and hours, just walking around in a park, carrying everything they owned. And then after that train left, caught a next train from St. Louis to Chicago, where they bought regular tickets, sat in a passenger car, and passed for white, and created a completely different life in the North. My grandfather was able to start a business. My relatives are from that. The legacy of that is great success. But my grandfather also carried with him all the traditions of Creole culture and Hoodoo culture. Hoodoo it's akin to voodoo. Everybody's heard of voodoo, and that's very religious. And I'm pretty sure that that was part of his stuff too. But he never admitted any of this. What I noticed and recognized later as I learned more about my culture, my mother's family culture, he had all these weird quirks that he would always do. Things like if you swept the floor, he had a cabin up in Wisconsin, and if you had to sweep the floor in a certain direction, and then you had to sweep all of the dust and sand and whatnot from the floor to the center of the room, going counterclockwise around. And what I learned is the counterclockwise breaks any kind of hex that has been put on you. And then we and I would help as a young adolescent. My grandmother was disabled. And so we had a cabin right there in the summers, and we would help by cleaning up and helping them around the house. And then we'd have to take that dustpan to the big wooden table where he sat at the head of the table. And he would put that in front of him, and he had a metal, like an aluminum ashtray, and he would pick out any string or hair or anything else that could be that had come from any people who lived there's body, and he would burn that in the ashtray. And then we would take the dust, what was left, the sand and the dirt out, and there was a hill down to the lake, and there was a spot beyond a certain distance away from the house where we would toss it over the hill, away from the house. And you had to sweep the stoop, the little porch all the time, because people could pepper your stoop, and by putting herbs and things there, that you then carry this bad juju into your home. So he did all this very, very critical protection things all the time, and also blessing things. So like making the roux, I was helping my grandmother. I remember standing on a stool, and roux is it's a brown white sauce. If you don't know what it is, it's butter and flour, and you stir and you stir and you stir and you stir until the flour starts to brown and it gets this certain smell. And you got to be very careful. My grandfather was very meticulous. You got to watch it very closely. You never stop stirring with that wooden spoon, and it reaches right at the certain point. You remove it from the heat, and then you stir in the warm milk, and you get this delicious sauce. But my grandmother was teaching me how to make the roux. And I was stirring, and I had the wooden spoon, and I had one of her aprons on, and I'm stirring away, stirring it clockwise around. And he gets out of his chair, he says, "Stop, stop, stop." And I'm like, "What?" And my grandmother was not Creole culture. My grandmother did not know that my grandfather had passed. This was a huge secret. As a matter of fact, when my mother found this out in the 1980s and approached him with it, I found your birth certificate that said, and all these ancestors. He became furious and made her leave the house and said, "Don't ever say that again," because the secret that he had to keep forever. So his wife didn't even know this stuff. And he took my hand in that roux, and he said, "You stir like this," and it was counterclockwise circles around, counterclockwise, counterclockwise.
Right.
And then the last stir, after it's just ready to go, you take it off the heat, you give it 3 clockwise stirs, and that puts the blessing into it.
Wow. Amazing.
Now, he didn't tell me why I had to do it that way.
Yeah.
He just told me I had to do it that way. And before I even knew its association with that folk magic, I did it I taught my children how to make it that way too. But then realizing why we did it that way is just amazes me. And my grandfather has been a part of my spirit team on the other side, and in many situations he's been a protector and an advisor, and very, very helpful to me. So that's the other side of my family, and these are people that are alive with spirits. That that there's it was just given that the world is not just made of physical matter, that there's just so much more beyond that, and that the things that we do, the way that we behave in our life, it impacts not just our physical world, but the spirit world as well. And so we have to be mindful to be gentle with both the physical world and the spirit world. And then my grandmother, was not Creole, excuse me, she was of Northern European, Swedish, and German. And I remember the first time I saw the fairies was up there in Wisconsin. And we slept in a bunkhouse just off the main house. And it was just a small cabin. I mean, the main house was just a small cabin. It was a one-room, well, a two-room cabin, I guess. But I woke up really early and it was really misty out. And we slept in these narrow, like army bunks. Mm. And nobody else was awake, but I could smell coffee and I could smell bacon cooking. So I knew that my grandparents were up. So I got up and pulled on my jeans, and it was chilly outside, and I made my way into the kitchen, and my grandfather said, "Oh, look, it's an early bird." And this memory is so vivid. He was sitting at the head of the table and having his coffee. And my grandmother, who always, this is early in the morning, it's barely daylight. And she's got earrings on, and she was always so beautiful. My mother, there were so many children that she was always kind of haggard. But my grandmother was always put together so well. And she said, "Sit up near Gramps and I'll get you a cup of cafe au lait." And that's warm milk with a little bit of coffee and sugar in it. And I was so small. It was the year before I turned 5, the year before I was going to start school, that when I sat in the chair, the table was like about here. So I'm like stirring my cafe au lait like my grandfather, only and they were these big cups in a saucer. And with his cup, he had a teaspoon that he would scoop butter out of the butter, swirl it in the sugar, and then swirl it around in his coffee. And then so it melted a little, and then he would sip that. And he would tell stories and talk, and it was so wonderful. And I remember seeing the rainbows on his coffee from the grease from the butter. But they had a big picture window. I was looking out, and it was over the lake, and it was a mist coming up from the lake, and it was moving as the sun was getting higher. And I just said, look, that looks like ladies dancing. And my grandmother came from the kitchen and put my cafe au lait in front of me, and she sat down next to me, and she said, "That's a fairy mist." And I said, "Oh," and she said, "If you listen really closely, you might be able to hear them sing." And then she got up and went back to the kitchen. So I was sitting there. My gramps was very quiet and giving my grandmother the side-eye grandparent conspiratorial kind of wink. And I said, "I can't hear anything." And she said, "Maybe you need to go outside." And I said, "Really?" Now, I was a little child. I lived in the city in Chicago. And being up in the woods, it was always safe in the woods. But I had never been by myself. And she said, "Why don't you take the path to the point and see if you can hear them singing?" And this was a path that went past another cabin where no one was staying at the time. My brothers and sisters and I were all up there without our parents because my younger brother was being born. And my father was in law school, and my mother was having a baby. So Gramps came and brought us all up north. And so we were there with just my grandparents. So I was barefoot. I was little. And I was so nervous. I was so excited and nervous. And it was a thick fog. And I started walking down the path, and it's all sand. And I just kind of kept my feet to the path. And my grandmother came out to watch me because I was afraid to go. And she said, go, you're fine, just go to the point. But the rule was to stay out of the water. We could never go in the water without a grown up there, of course. That's children drowned all the time by disobeying their grandparents. So I walked down the path, kept peeking until I couldn't see her anymore. And then at the end of this little path, narrow footpath, was a special tree, and we called it the sitting tree. And this was a tree, it was a pine tree that had been bent and tethered down. So it went up, and then it bent to a right angle, and then went up again. And this was something that the Ojibwa people used to do to mark a special place or a direction. But to have it on a point like this, it must have been marking a special place. And I would go in the daytime when it was bright sun and not foggy, and just sit there and just listen and imagine, and the crystal blue water sparkling in the sunlight. So I made my way to the sitting tree, and I just sat there, and I just looked up and watched the mist swirling, because the cool water and the sun hadn't quite come up yet. It was just creating like a vortex of this mist. And pretty soon I started seeing like beautiful, the huge, tall, cloud-like, made of the mist beings, beautiful faces coming and looking at me and moving by. And I was just so mesmerized. And the next thing I knew, I could hear the music. And it's a melody that I've tried to recreate. I know what the basic melody is, but the sound itself was so heavily layered in harmonics. There's fifths, there's 5 parts, there's 7 parts, there's 12 parts. It was just an everything of sound. And it was beautiful and melodic. And I remember the basic melody of it, but I can't reproduce it. And I've tried on various instruments, and it doesn't work, because it was like the air vibrating that created the music, the air itself, or the beings themselves. And then the next thing I knew, I was like up, and they called my name, and I was up in the air dancing with them and moving with them, and just in this music, and just light and free, and just floating in the air. And then I looked down at the lake, and I landed on top of the lake, and my view, it wasn't like you had to look around to see things. I became the lake, and I could perceive the sky and the sides and everything. I was just part of everything all there. And then all of a sudden I had this thought, oh no, I'm in the water. I'm going to be in big trouble. And all of a sudden, I felt myself fall back into myself, and I was sitting on the tree. And this was just as the sun poked up over the treetops on the other side in the east. And it was an out-of-body experience with the fairy mist, the people that live there. And I had this, and I checked to make sure I wasn't wet. I had the most amazing sense of understanding, of a part of everything. I was the lake, I was the air, I was the mist. I just was part of everything. And I just had this euphoria that I just started laughing. And then I ran back, and all my siblings were all sitting around the table getting breakfast. And they're like, where have you been? And my grandmother just comes up. She says, never you mind. And she comes and puts this here, sit here, and puts a plate in front of me. And I was just looked up at her, and she said nothing. She just gave me a wink. And we never spoke of that. But it's like she knew. It's like she knew. Yeah, so that's my early childhood experiences. And that wonder and that connection to everything has always, always been with me.
Oh, my goodness, Tiyi, I feel so moved listening to this, because it's such a beautiful experience of, this connection with the divine from a really young age, and the traditions that had been passed down through your family, but just the knowing seeping through everything, and
Yes.
being able to share that, and the stirring. I mean, often we think about the stirring if we're cooking, don't we? And,
Right.
often with our kids, if we're making a cake, we'll say, right, stir it and put a wish in it. But to know the specific to your family,
Right.
and maybe to his wider community when he was a child, and
Mm-hmm.
how he was really explicit about how to do it. I love that. I can see it, the anti-clockwise swirls going all the way around in an anti-clockwise, and then ending with the three, three for manifestation, 1, 2, 3, and go. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And he said, and my grandmother said, "Oh, leave her alone. She's fine." And he said, "No, she needs to know how to do this." And my other siblings, I don't know if they recognize something in me. I ended up having a lot of different things happen in my life that have been very challenging too, and things that have come to me have all helped me get through these challenges throughout my life. And I wonder if my one daughter, who's also very well, all my children are, but one of my daughters who's very close and in tune with me and all this spooky stuff, um, she had she said to me, they probably just intuited that you were the one to pass this on, to carry this on. And it was never spoken, but it was the stories and everything, and I absorbed them and remembered them and have told them. So that's it. But my other sisters and my brothers had to do things exactly how Gramps wanted to, and they all said that he was just OCD. But
It is just,
and
another perspective.
right. And for a while I was thinking that as well, but then when I learned more about the root magic and root work, I realized, oh my goodness, he was showing me. He was his hand on my hand, and I can feel he had this brown hand with long fingers, and his hand just gently pressed on my hand. I just passing it through his body into my body, into my soul. And yeah, what a wonderful gift.
It really is. I think it's there's a sense of, when you're open to it, the knowledge finds you as well.
That's right.
That, if he's intuiting, and he will have done, that the knowledge wanted to go there, then it was, and I'm sure it wasn't even a thought process for him, but a natural passing on.
Right, right. And
Um,
I'm not sure even if all of the things he did, he was cognizant of their significance, but I know he was taught them. And his family lived 1 block from Congo Square in the Treme. And on Sundays, that was where all of the roots and all the root doctors and everybody would meet on Sundays. And this was forever. I mean, even in the time of slavery, Sundays in New Orleans, the enslaved people had Sunday off and could go to Congo Square. That's why it was called Congo Square Market. And my grandfather and his mother would go and collect things. And as a matter of fact, when he was born, he was born. He was born like more than 6 weeks premature, and this was in the last century. That so the chance of to a Creole family in New Orleans, the chance of his survival was very slim. And so my great grandfather would not give him his name because he didn't want to waste his name on a child that wouldn't survive. But he was born on St. John's Eve. And St. John's Eve is a very powerful day in New Orleans. it's like the most powerful day in magic for voodoo and hoodoo.
Mm.
And he was born on that day. So the women in the block, and they lived a block from the, there was the original Marie Laveau, and then there were the voodoo queen, Marie Laveau, that lived the next generation, and they were the second or third generation of Marie Laveau was in their block. And they made a gree-gree for him. First of all, they said, name him John, and his name for St. John's Eve. And they made a gree-gree for him, which is a pouch of magical things. And in it was a piece of his amniotic sac.
Oh, amazing.
And Florida water, which is it's used in root work and hoodoo root work, and that was on my grandfather's shower, so that was his scent. And every time I work with it, I have him in present when I'm working with that. And so his name was John Numa, and Numa is a name that goes back to their African roots. Numa is a name that has been in every generation, and we were able to trace our family back to where our African ancestors even came from, largely based on that name. It was passed on by the free people of color in my family.
Incredible that you can trace back too.
Yeah, my mom did all that research, and then my daughters carried on with Jeanette and family members, because we found each other, and with in the United States, that people leaving the South after segregation, all the Jim Crow, is called the Great Migration, and people lost track of relatives. I have all these cousins that are still in New Orleans that weren't European enough looking to be able to pass, that just stayed, and ties were broken. And so in the time where we have the internet and we can reconnect again, my mother started collecting the genealogy and then contacting through letter relatives. And now in my generation, I am in contact with distant relatives from my grandfather's family, my mother's family, still in New Orleans, in Texas, and California. All the places, the two big groups that moved from my family moved, one to Chicago and the other to California. And the ones who moved to California were ones who would have a harder time passing for white, because California was more tolerant, because there were so many Hispanics in California, in Southern California. So they went to the LA area. And those who had sharper features, and they called it better hair, which just gives me just, but it went to Chicago and had to hide and had to pass. But now we're able to reconnect with these my relatives. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I mean, it's horrifying to think about it, isn't it? And and also it's still happening
Yes.
in the world. We can't forget that either. And did your family in California, did they go with the traditions as well? I'm wondering how open your grandfather was able to be as well about these traditions. Were you ever told not to tell anybody else in the, or was it just so kind of, inexplicit that this is why he was telling you?
No, it never was. It was never. It was just he just showed me this stuff, and then I observed. I was very fascinated by him. I was very connected to his energy too, and of all my elders, I was always very connected to my elders. And then, but that nobody ever said this comes from your culture, because his story was that that was told in Chicagoland was that that they were French. They were French from New Orleans, because the last name is a French sounding name, and that they were French and maybe some Spanish, but there was no African discussed. I mean, we're talking America is a place that is founded in racism. And in order to provide the privilege to his progeny, they had to deny all that. And so it was never spoken of, and it was never cherished as such a rich thing should be in my family. Now, I have not spoken about this aspect of myself with my newly found cousins, which I think I know one that I'm going to probably want to do that with. Speaking of this, because I probably should see if there are others who have gotten some of this. I know that in my generation, there aren't any in my generation that are doing the kinds of things that I'm doing.
Okay.
In the ones that I know in my generation from my side of the family. But that isn't to say that some of my relatives, my newly discovered relatives, aren't practicing still in New Orleans or Texas or wherever they are, because some didn't leave until Katrina.
Right.
So, and there are still some there. And my sister it lives in New Orleans now, and I've got,
How were they with Katrina?
oh boy, that was rough. My sister, I know, was able to evacuate, and my first cousins who were there were able to evacuate. A lot of my relatives were evacuated to Texas. They moved. Texas is fairly close. Okay. And just decided not to go back. It took so long, and still to this day, it's not fully back. But it just rebuilding, and the place where everybody lived. My sister now lives in the Bywater, right by the 9th Ward, which was the one that was completely flooded. And people just lost everything, and so they decided. Well, they were there for more than a year before it was even possible to go back. Houses were torn down. There was nothing left. So they just were forced to settle again, leaving their culture behind and picking up anew, So the new generation of my family, my ancestors had to do that for Jim Crow. And then my relatives had to do that because of neglect and poverty and Katrina. Yeah.
Layers of generational trauma, and it's unthinkable, really. And I'm thinking of your grandfather and what he will have, what he experienced as a child in terms of where he picked this up from. Because obviously, clearly, it was all around him. But I'm imagining also that lots of things that or parts of the community or parts of your family were practicing, and the fact that he was concerned about, the minutiae of detritus on the floor, tiny bits of human hair, and that he knew that this held power potential.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that he was a practitioner. He never spoke it out loud, never admitted it. He did not admit his Creole culture. He did not admit his Creole heritage. But he did things like in his workshop, he folded up these little pieces of canvas cloth and with nothing in them, and would hang them from strings or wires from the ceiling. And when I asked my mom about it, why does Gramps do that? And I asked Gramps about it. What is that? He says to keep them safe, is what I said, what I thought he said, to keep them safe. And my mother said, well, it keeps the rodents from getting in it. And I said, but they're just little pieces of canvas. And she said, well, he uses them for patches and things and wants to have them, but they just hung there. Well, this is a hoodoo practice. You fold the intention into the cloth and you hang it up. And it's not to protect the cloth. It was to protect us, not to protect the cloth, but to protect us. So, and that he wasn't just doing because his mother did it, that he was doing on purpose. And I think in the 1920s and 30s, there was a big occult rising, and his friends up in Wisconsin called him the Big Mamu. And he was like the center of attention. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he was doing some conjuring and doing some, some work. And in his passing, with him on the other side, when I have been doing some spirit work, some things that were a little dangerous, and about to do a spell, a hoodoo spell, a master key spell, which is a hoodoo spell to control the situation I was going into in doing spirit work. He warned me. He came to me and woke me up, shook me awake. And I woke up and I sensed him right there and could, I could make him out without my eyes. And I heard his voice say, "Don't do it. It knows your name." And then I saw the master key spell stuff up there and I put it all away and I sewed it up in red flannel and put the X's on it, put it away so it could not, none of it could be used. All the supplies I had gathered for it. And I put it in a cedar box where it still is to this day. So he knew about that stuff. And I think, whatever you put out there comes back to you, and not always in a way that you hope. And one of the things that I think him saying it knows your name was a way of saying that they recognize me. And when we ask things of the spirit world, of the elementals, the fae, anybody, we cannot make them do our bidding. When we think that that's possible, that's when they have you.
Yeah.
That's when they have you. So, and that lesson I learned from both sides of my family, that this is not something you control. This is something that when you are in that space, you are the tourist. You need to learn that culture and to be safe and know what to do in certain situations, know how to recognize things, what to pay attention for. And that I've learned from my relatives while they were alive, and even more so after they've passed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a much clearer direction when they are passed.
Yeah.
They don't have their own, say, insecurities or fears about, saying too much or too little, or, that they might be misunderstood. And so I found that too, that, those loved ones that have passed over are the direction is just extremely clear, and very, I'm very grateful for that, because there are things that I would talk to these loved ones about when they were alive, but now you're talking directly consciousness to consciousness, and
Right.
to have your grandfather give you a direct message like that, to stop. And because you really feel it, or the messages. Either way,
Right.
when you're getting a push in the right direction, or a stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, indeed. Indeed.
I mean, this has all fed into your experience of the world. And I guess, it doesn't surprise me hearing how things started for you being there. And I'm really kind of with you there over the lake, and experiencing the beauty of the morning, the richness of the start of the day. And, it's natural that you want to be part of that. And a part of you did join that and was part of that with these beings. And then, as often happens when we're out of our body astrally, suddenly, oh, what if I can't get back, or whatever it is that you have these kind of material realm concerns, and then, you're back in the body.
There you go.
But how beautiful to then, because if you'd got home and been scolded, I feel so sorry, because we all know what that's like, don't we? If you've had something really precious happen, and we're so open, especially as really little ones, we're so open, and then to get feedback that we've done something wrong it just closes us down. And so to hear that you were able to go off and explore, and then to come home and really feel that loving connection from your grandmother is just everything. I mean,
Yes,
it's just down my spine thinking about it. It's beautiful. But this has really informed your working and your relationship with the landscape. Would you
very
like
much
to
so.
describe anything that, that you feel kind of encompasses that in your experiences? And because also I know that you've passed this on to your grandchildren too, so we can get to that too. But,
Sure.
talking to you and hearing your relationship, for instance, when you're in a forest or any other kind of natural environment, is just very striking.
So I am very tuned in the force, and I'm so blessed to live in a place that it's so accessible. Um, it's so close, and there's places in this forest that's outside of my city that are just wild, that people don't go to. And there are places where people go, but are also just pristine and kept. But it's not well traveled. These places are not well traveled. I You can be all day and not another human being would not be in come by. Or so there's a couple of places that I especially go to. We found a place that has a spring, um, that even in the winter, and we get lots of snow here. It's very cold and winter is very long. We joke that we have 9 months of winter and 3 months of company in the summer, but deep snow, and yet this spring is bubbling right out of the earth, and it's white sand at the bottom, and you can see it bubbling up, and all around the rim of this spring, and it's small. It's maybe a 12-foot diameter spring. All around the edge is watercress, is green, that stays green all winter. And this is a place that it's very hard to get to. And I have physical disabilities, and I haven't been able to go for several years. I'm hoping to be able to go again, but my sons go fetch water for me. And I use this water at my altar, and it's blessing water. And I also get water from other sources, from the river, from the creeks, from streams, that I use. Water is a big part of many of my rituals. And so when I go, there's this one place in particular that's a grove in this area that has a really steep ravine down to the river, down to the stream. And at one point, it was a campground, but they removed all the fire rings and took out all the infrastructure. But there's still a stairway to go down in the hillside, this long stairway in the hillside, so you can go down to near to the river. And I know fishers sometimes use it to get down to, it's a trout stream. But I am able to get down to the river on these stairs. So this is a place that I like to take myself to. And I've had many, many experiences there. I learned a long time ago that to be a polite guest, if you're invited to a dinner or a party, you bring a hostess gift. You bring something. You bring a bottle of wine. You bring something. So I always, always bring something with me when I go to the forest. And this one place, the first time, I should tell you how I first encountered this one spot. My son is a fisher, and he knows the stream, and he has twins, and at the time they were like toddlers, not quite two, maybe 1.5 years old. And they were down by the river, and his son Loudon needed a diaper change. So the car was up parked on the road at the top of the hill. So he brings Loudon up to do a diaper change. And as they get to the top of the hill, Loudon grabs his neck and is holding on really tight and says, "Daddy, scary man, scary man." And my son Ezra is very sensitive and very in tune with the woods as well. He's maybe more so than I've learned from him. He says, "What's scary man?" He says, the green man there." And Ezra looked, and he got this rush. And this is a thing that even when you can't see spirit, you know, you feel it there. And I call it like it's ghost for bingo or spirit for bingo. You're like, bingo. So he knew something was there, and he relaxed, instead of tensing up, which is what we do when we get scared. We go, and I have taught him, instead of that, you exhale and you calm and relax. And so loud and relaxed. And he said, it's okay. This is their place too. And so loud was fine. And he just said, hello, we're just visiting. And then he changed loud and went back. Well, then we were at my son's house, who was very near to this place. And like a weekend later or something. And he was telling me about this. And there have been other incidents. When it was a campground, my daughters had camped there and had come back scared off by footsteps around the tent. And people go there and get scared off all the time. And he said, there's something going on out there. And I want you to get out there sometime to see what's there, because I'm somebody that can read places and read spirit and things. So I said, well, let's go now. And so we got in the car and we went and parked the car. And I always walk with a cane. So I walk in with my cane and I stepped up the berm. They put a berm there to keep vehicles from coming in. And I felt this wall of vibration. And it felt very similar to where the spring is. I had a profound encounter at the spring where I was gifted with a prayer, a mantra prayer. So I got this same feeling, and I recognized this as a very liminal space. And I just stopped and I said, oh, there aren't ghosts here. This is something altogether different. These are the forest spirits. This is the elementals. This is their place. And so I asked permission. Can I come in? And immediately the shimmer kind of thing sort of dropped away. And we walked in and walked between these two trees, two very old grandmother trees, and felt like I had come into a magical place. And it was a magical place. We didn't see anyone there that time. We didn't hear anyone. Didn't have any gifts, because I thought I was going to see what it was haunted with. And so instead, we just sang, because singing can be a gift as well. So I just picked a melody and just sang a melody and just said, hello, I'm so happy to be here. And I said, this is a sacred place. This is that you have nothing to be afraid of here. Just be gentle here. And I sensed too that they recognized my son. He said that he fishes, and now he says he can't even fish anymore. He does not feel like he can take a life anymore. But in this place, he never kept the fish that he caught there. It was always just catch and release. He just felt like he could not take from that place. So I felt like they recognized him, and I felt like they approved of him. And so not out loud, but I introduced myself. And I consider myself, I've been called. And so this is the name that I use myself, that I'm a gatekeeper. Not a gatekeeper in terms of protecting a gate, but a person who tends a gate. A gatekeeper in a gate. When we think of things beyond the veil, a veil shrouds and you can't see beyond it. A gate, you can swing both ways, and it can be welcoming and it can be protecting. And so when I do work in the spirit world or in the other world, multiple, because there's more than one place, I'll tell you what right now, that it's like opening a gate and closing a gate. And I close the gate to protect some things that are beyond there, because there are some people that I do not want
No.
to experience that at all, because I protect this place. I don't reveal where it is. I don't tell people where it is. Um, I want to protect that place, because humans, we go in and we want to know more. And someday somebody's going to know that we want to, let's go ghost hunting. Let's go fairy hunting. And just those words just arg, and it's, we are gifted the experience of them. When we go do it for entertainment or for a thrill, it's so disrespectful. It's like somebody has visited your house and really liked the artwork on your wall. And so then the next week they show up with 12 people to show them the artwork on your wall. It's akin to that. So I don't, that's not it. So as a gatekeeper, I announced myself as that in the physical world, in the human world, and gave grace and honor, and then we left. And then the next time we went all together, and we just go from time to time. We'll build a fire down. There's a fire pit by the river and sit. I go on the solstices. Well, the winter solstice, summer solstice. I'm always in Wisconsin. And then on the cross quarters, we go and bring more things, and then always ask permission, and ask if we could collect water. There have been a couple of times when I needed some water, I thought, and we went to the other spring and were sent away. And Ezra came running up and like frightened away. And it's like, no, we can't get anything this time. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. We're always, and I realized that even though I was bringing gifts, I was always taking something. Okay. So I stopped taking something every time I'm there, and just bring things, and then just be there. And this is a real healing place for me. It's a place I can go on my own as someone who is disabled, which is remarkable to me. I've been in and out of wheelchairs my whole life, and to be able to be in the forest alone is, oh my gosh, it brings back the same feeling I had when I was almost 5 and being alone in the woods. It just opens everything up to me. So the one experience that I've had ones where I just said I bring my a chair that I could carry and sit in, and I was painting, and I was on top of the hill, and I was painting the 2 trees that I think of as the gate trees.
Yeah.
And the 2, that's the gateway. That's before walking through that I asked permission. And I'm nearsighted, so I had my glasses on top of my head so that I could see the paints up close. And I'm sitting and painting a small painting, the glass up on my head, and I looked up, and the air between the trees was shimmering. And without my glasses, so I'm now looking, I realize now I need to look without my eyes. So I shift into looking with my third eye, and I see on the other side of these trees someone just like me. Doesn't look like me, but someone who was just like me, just watching me, just standing there. It was a grandmother. It was an old woman just watching me. And I looked up and I just smiled, and she just went. And so I just raised my hand too, and then it just went, and it was gone. Mm. And I consider her the gatekeeper on the other side of that space. So she is protecting me and protecting them as I am protecting me and them. This is someone that is doing the work that I do here over there. And I know she's there. And every time I'm there, I don't know her name. We don't need to know each other's name. We know each other's heart. We know each other's soul. I always greet her. And with the Anishinaabe word for gratitude is miigwech. And these are the indigenous people who lived here knew these spirits. And this is someone that would remember the language of the indigenous people here. So my son always goes and speaks in Anishinaabe and the greeting when he goes. And I speak in my language because that's what mine. But so I know that they're there. I know everybody's there, and I've had multiple just pleasant experiences there. One that do you want me to tell the one that is in your book?
If you like to, yes, that would be wonderful. If you,
Okay.
yeah, if you're happy to.
This was a life changing. I wish I had the kalimba up here. This was a life changing experience for me. In that it made all of this stuff on from the other places tangible and come into mind. So my husband had a minor stroke, and he was in a place where shortly after the stroke, where in the first 30 days, the possibility of having a second stroke was huge. And so we had to watch him 24/7. So it was like having a brand new baby. I was always in his presence. I barely slept because I was always waking up and just checking, make sure, that he was okay, so that if something happened, we could get him to the hospital right away. It wouldn't be devastating stroke. And after multiple days of this, more than a week, it was a Saturday and it was a clear day in the fall, just crisp air, high sky, high blue sky. And my son lives next door. And he says to me, "Why don't you go be by yourself and I'll watch Bunsey." We all call my husband Bunsey. And I've got a project. We'll do a project together. You go take as much time as you need. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know just where I'm going. So I put together a little flask, because I bring something, I leave things for the creatures that are there. And I also pour either whiskey or wine on the earth itself to thank the forest. So I had a little flask of bourbon whiskey, and I put together the bread and butter and honey that I bring usually. And I have a special place where I leave it. I have a little stone dish under a seedling, under a small white pine tree that I would put it in. That since has disappeared, and it's not at a place where a human would find it. Okay. I'm pretty sure somebody took it. Somebody there took it. Anyway, that's what my son thinks. But anyway, so I left that in the dish, and then I walked back and I carried my chair, and it's one of those harder chairs, so I could use two sides to get down those steps. Mm-hmm. And it takes me a long time to get there. I put my chair down on the bank. It's another probably 12 to 14 feet down to the river. So I'm up on this ledge, and then the river, it's a small river down below that runs really quick and cold. And then there's a steep rise on the other side that's filled with aspen trees and pine trees, and there's nobody around. I mean, the nearest house is, half a mile or more away, probably more. But in that direction where I was facing is nothing, because it's just the national forest continues. And I just put my chair down, and I just wanted to breathe and just meditate and relax and let everything out. But first I opened the flask and I poured some, and I said, "Miigwech," to the earth. And on the other side, I did the same and took a little sip for myself and put it in the side pouch of my chair. And then I play different musical instruments. And one that I have is an mbira. It's an African instrument it's also called a kalimba or a thumb piano. And it's a hollow box with metal tines on it. And you pluck the tines and go boop, 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 boop. So I just sat, and I often do musical meditation where I play music, and it just the vibration fills my soul, fills everything else. And it was warm. I could feel the sun on my skin, and I'm playing the mbira, and I just stopped because I heard leaves rustling behind me, and it's a steep hill behind me as well. So steep hill behind me, steep hill out of me on the other side of the river. And then the river goes long. I'm on this long ridge, and I hear leaves starting to rustle toward me. So I turn around, and there is all the heavy fall leaves. The trees were all bare at this time, are kind of like the wind is pushing them down toward me. And I'm like, oh, it must be windy up there. And I looked up in the trees, and the trees weren't moving. Mm-hmm. It was the leaves as if it was just the wind on the ground. And I just thought, that's interesting. And the sound was just this shh of the leaves moving. And then I noticed that to my left, upriver, the leaves were moving toward me. Shh. And I looked to my right, and they were moving toward me there. Now, a wind could come down the hill, but what it would have done is to my right and left, those leaves would be going the same direction as the ones on the top, but they weren't. They were moving toward me. And at first, I was like confused, and then I was like, wow. Because as it came, it wasn't a wind. It was a rush of like energy, and it didn't get to me. It stopped like probably 10 feet behind me. The leaves didn't come any further, and probably that far on either side. It just stopped, and then there was silence, and I felt this warmth. This was in November. It was a warm day in November, but it's still cool. It's like in the upper 40s, maybe in Fahrenheit. And, I was sweating stuff, but I just felt warmth. And I felt like I had this hug. I felt like the woods itself had wrapped itself around me. And I just was like, tears started to flow. And so I played the melody again and then set it back down. I just sat there, tears. I wasn't sobbing. They were just falling out of my body as I just breathed. And all of a sudden I started hearing this clacking like wooden wind chimes. Have you heard that clacking sound?
Mm-hmm.
And it came from the other side of the river and up the hill. And I stopped, and my eyes were closed because with my eyes closed, I was just feeling the energy. And I listened, and it was, when you play the kalimba, you repeat the pattern. You do the melody over and over and over again. So it's like boom, 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 boom. And I was just repeating. And when I wasn't playing, sounding like wood, like tree branches, it was going boom, 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 boom. Multiple notes. It wasn't like a da 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 da. There could be other things. This matched, and as a musician, it was the melody I had played in the trees, and I was like, oh, thank you. And this euphoria, it was like, oh, they played, whoever it was, played the melody back to me. And I was so overcome. I was like, tears no longer. I was just like unbelievably overjoyed. And thank goodness no one else was there, because there was no way to exclaim anything to, because when it stopped, it just kind of got softer and softer and softer and stopped. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And then I started to hear water drops. In the same melody, the exact same melody that I played. And I was like, oh, thank you. In the names and all the names of everything holy. Thank you. And I knew everything was going to be okay. I knew I was cradled and cushioned and lifted. It was like the same feeling that when you're bundled up and carried out of a cold car into your warm bed as a child. I just sat there astounded for the longest time. And when I got home, I walked in, and my husband was sitting there, my son, and my daughter, Arabella, who is the other spooky one with me, the one most spooky, was on the phone. And I said, I have to tell you something. And I thought it was a gift from the forest spirits. And I said, the spirits who lived there, the water spirits played back to me, the tree spirits played back to me, and the ground spirits moved. And my son said, I think it was the forest itself. It wasn't the spirits of the trees. It was the tree spirits, the tree itself, the water itself. And in the beliefs of the people who were the first people here, it's everything is animate. Everything has spirit and life. So there isn't another spirit using the trees to make music or using the water to make music. It is the water itself is alive. It is the tree itself is alive. It is the earth itself that is alive. And the earth and the water and the green came to me and rescued me in this one of the most frightening times of my life. And I am forever grateful. And I just had a thought, having just said those words, and I had never thought of this before, but I've got that full body aha rush. When I told you that many years ago I was gifted with my prayer mantra at the spring, and I'm going to share that with you. I've shared it with others. And the words that I just said are going to hopefully do to you what they just did to me. The blessing, it's a blessing, and it's spirit of this sacred place. Grant your blessing, grant your grace. Keep me safe in night and day. Hold me ever in your sway. Spirit of water, earth, and green, grant me sight for things unseen. And I just said, the green, the earth, and the water. I never realized that was it. That was the blessing. It was spirit of water, earth, and green. Gave me that amazing gift. Yeah. And so we go there with the children, and we've had the children there since they were, as a matter of fact, their very first outing, not this particular spot, but other places near there where, I mean, it's vast. You could go pretty much anywhere in that forest and sit down, and it becomes a liminal place. Anywhere there, even places that have been newly timbered, you can still feel the grief of the loss of the trees. But but they've been going there and have been taught that everything has spirit, everything has life, everything is equal to us. They are all our relatives. The earth is our relative. The trees are our relatives. The rocks, everything. And so even though they go and will play and run around and do this stuff, they do it with a reverence and understanding and just an acceptance that this is the reality, that everything has life, everything has spirit. And so here in the city, there's a hill right behind our houses here. My son lives right next door. He bought the house next door to us.
Oh, perfect.
It's a wonderful blessing. And the twins are now almost 13. But one time they were walking the dog up there, and they came back, and they were telling me about this path that they like to walk, and they walk past the talking tree. And I said, oh, the talking tree. And I figured it was an aspen. Aspen are called quaking aspen because when the leaves rustle, they go shh, they make a sound. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that. And I said, oh, is it aspen? And they said, no, they're those big, huge trees with the really smooth bark. And those are beech trees. Mm-hmm. And beech trees don't make those sounds. And so I said, what do you mean talking tree? What sound does it make? And they said, and I said, what? And their mom, Lindsay, said, oh, yeah, we walk by the talking tree all the time. I've got to get there. Now, I'm not able to get up the hill, but there's a way to drive around. And I was feeling particularly mobile at the time. It's a little more difficult path to get to. And so we went to the talking tree, and it's a little copse of these giant ancient beech trees. And they're on the top of this high hill. It's one of the highest points in the lower peninsula of Michigan. And they've been there for well over a century. And walked in amongst these trees and just put my back against one of the trees. And my husband and I were there. The children weren't there with us. And oh my goodness, these grandmothers called out to my grandchildren.
Yeah.
And there they are. And I can look up the hill, even now that I can't walk there yet, and see that their leaves starting to come back again this year. And so they understand that and have great respect for the earth, for the wild things and spirit things. I've taught my children to not be afraid of spirit, not be afraid of ghosts, even human ghosts. They're people. You know, you don't invite strangers into your home, but you interact with them. Don't be afraid. They're not going to hurt you. Teach them how to not hurt you. Teach them how to use their own energy to create their own bubble of protection. And also, I've made little grease for all of my grandchildren, and they have those and wear those, and it's made specifically for them. And so when I make them, I use the cloth and pick certain herbs that mean certain things, roots that mean certain things, and then maybe a metal, a blessed metal or something that I myself do the blessing. And there's ways to bless things. We put intention into things and then stitch them up and make these little things that they can wear around their neck or have and keep with them. And I make oils that they have that they can use, protection oils and other things that my little apothecary is just part of it. And they like to sit at my altar, and we'll light some cedar and sage in the shell on the side and light the candles and say the blessing, call the good spirit. And then I have angel cards. I'll pick angel cards out or just spend a few minutes there. So I share that space with them. And it's just not weird to them. It's just not, it's just like how I grew up. It's just part of life. And so they are all growing up with the same sense of wonder of nature and spirit and the wholeness of life. Oh man, this universe, that we live in, the reality is so much more astounding than what even when we stop to meditate and pay attention, that we're aware of. It's just amazing. Do we have time for me to tell you something that happened just this past week?
Yes, please. If you have the time, then yes.
I do. So this was something connected to, but completely different than anything I've ever experienced in my life. In this place too, there's my sons have all experienced other things there. Like real quickly, one time, my sons were fishing and with two other guys, and they spread up down the creek, and my one son, Zach, had gone upstream, and he was heading upstream. The water was flowing toward him, and a ways up, they spread out, so their line don't tangle their lines. And a ways upriver, there was a log that they had dropped across the river a long time ago to be able to go to the other side. So he's fishing, walking upstream, and he crossed the log to go to the other side and kept going upstream. And there is the place where we go, there's a bridge, there's a road. And so there's a bridge over the river. And the next one is more than a mile upstream is the next crossing. So he's going upstream and fishing. Meanwhile, Ezra, his younger brother, is fishing down near where the car was. And all of a sudden, he sensed that Zach was no longer in the world. Now, Ezra is very tuned in and intuitive, and he immediately tried to tune into him and feel him, and he couldn't feel him, and it scared him. He thought something had happened to Zach, that, he fell, he knocked something was wrong. He felt something was wrong. And so he starts walking upstream, and he gets the other guys, and they start calling to Zach, and he's following his tracks up along in the mud in the river, got to where the log was, and the log is moss covered, and saw his footprints on the log and did not see his footprints on the other side. So now he's like, well, what is happening here? It's not a deep stream. If he fell in the stream, he would have just gotten wet. It's maybe a foot deep at the most. But so Ezra heads back towards the car, very confused. And as he's heading back, he's feeling Zach back. So he looks back upriver, and Zach's not there. Meanwhile, Zach is going upriver, and he sees a bridge. And he's like, oh my goodness, have I walked a mile upstream? And so he takes his, while fly fishing. So he wraps up his pole and he climbs up the embankment. And he is on the other side of the road from where the car was. Mm. Somehow he moved, still following toward the way the water was flowing. No, he wasn't going with the water flow. He was going against it. And all of a sudden, he is on the other side of the bridge. And he was so freaked out. He was like, well, I don't like that at all. And so they packed up and left. So that's happened there. So something moved him from there to there. They've had rocks thrown from the high ridge across when there's nobody there, a big rock right in the river. Bloop. It's like, okay, we're done fishing. It's time to leave. Yeah. So this past week on the full moon, the full May moon, it was a beautiful night. The day had been warm. In the 70s up here is like, oh, it's summer. And so my husband and I decided we would go out to this grove to watch the moonrise. And we parked in the spot, and we brought my wheelchair because it's easier for me to sit. I broke my back a few months ago, and so I'm still walking with a walker, and I need the good place to sit. A camp chair isn't so good for that. So he pushes the wheelchair in. This time I didn't bring butter bread and honey because I had baked some fresh blueberry muffins. And so I brought blueberry muffins, and I put them by the grandmother trees before asking to come in. And we weren't there to see fairies or to see the forest spirits. We were there to watch the moonrise and to just to be in the woods. So I left the blueberry muffins by the tree, and then we put our chairs down. It's still light, the sun is low, the sky is red, it's beautiful sunset, but I could see clouds are coming in, didn't matter. We were on top of the ridge, facing toward the river, facing toward the east where the moon was going to rise. And we just sat there. My husband has an app where he can find all the planets and moon and stuff. So he pulled that out and he said, the moon's going to rise right there. And I said, I know that. But he put his devices away. We did not bring anything to drink. We did not bring anything to eat. We just sat there as the sun set in total silence, saying nothing, doing nothing, just sitting and watching the moonrise. And we sat there for about an hour and a half in total silence, feeling just, listening to the peepers. The spring peepers started as soon as the sun got low enough. The peepers were singing their little hearts out, and you could hear the day birds stop and night birds in the distance. And I just love, just immersed in this glorious sunset and then the full moon rising. And then as it was getting higher, all of a sudden it got cold and it was dark now, but we couldn't see the moon. I could see that there was a glow behind the tops of the trees. Turns out the clouds had come in. The sun set off Lake Michigan and the lake effect clouds had come in. So we weren't going to be able to see the moon. And it got chilly and the chill was settling in my back. And so for the first time in about an hour and a half, I just said to my husband, I think we need to go. I think I need to go. I'm getting cold and getting a little sore. And he said, okay, that's all. And so I just stood up. He took my chair and I had my walker and we're walking through the leaves. Only sound is a shoomp of my walker and our footsteps. And we're getting close to the car when right near us, like within 15 feet, I hear this loud, like whoop call. And we both froze. And I just looked at my husband and said, what was that? Now it's dark. I had my phone is on it's like a little phone purse. So I had that hanging in front of me with the flashlight on so I could see the ground. So that was aimed towards the ground, not around us. And I stopped and I looked at my husband and said, what was that? He said, I don't know. And we stood very still. and it did it again, just a little bit further away. And it sounded like this, woo! And it was, and I said, is that an owl? And we're like, that's not like any owl that lives near here. And it was so loud. It was this, woo! And it was vocal cords. It sounded like vocal cords. It was insane. And we're like, I don't know like what that is. But we waited, and I thought, I got my phone and put on the video. It was black, but I wanted to get the sound. The sound, it sounded like 3 or 4 more times. When we'd start to take a step, it would whoop again. And it wasn't like up in the trees. The trees are really tall there. An owl will be high up. These are like bare trunks. And this was parallel to us. And we didn't know what it was. When we took, I had the video going for a couple of minutes and then stopped it because nothing happened. Started to walk again, and it did it again. And then I heard the same call. We both heard the same call, like about a quarter of a mile away to the northeast, like something else was returning the call. And I said, what is that? Was that a owl, a bird? We didn't know what it was, but we're like, all right, we get in the car. And, and just before I got cold, the peepers stopped peeping. Mm-hmm. And now they'll stop if it gets below like 40 degrees. If it gets too cold, they stop singing, but it didn't feel that cold. Mm-hmm. But they had stopped singing, so now the woods is silent, and I'm feeling cold. That's when we decided to leave. We weren't listening and we weren't going to see the moon, and now it's time to go. Mm-hmm. So we decided to stop on our drive back on one of the paved back roads. There's a place where there's a pond on one side and wetlands and a little stream on the other. And as we were driving, when we got in the car, it was 63 degrees outside. So it was not cold. So the chill could have been just from being there so long, but whatever. The peepers were so loud that we stopped the car. I had my foot on the brake. I was driving, and opened all the windows. And we were just sitting there for about 5 minutes, just grinning and listening to this wonderful sound of the forest in spring. And I glanced up in the rearview mirror to make sure there was no cars coming, because I was just stopped right in the lane. When I looked in the mirror, I saw reflected in the brake lights this big handprint on the back of our car. Yeah. And I said, "What the hell is that?" And because I still can't shift around. So my husband turns around and says, "Oh my gosh, I don't know why." I said, "Did you put your handprint on the window when you opened the back to put the stuff in?" He says, "No, I didn't touch the window." And I'm like, that is weird. So we're like, we don't know what that is, but we're trying to figure out what could cause it. Now, the car was clean when we left the city, and we were on dirt roads. So if there was, I don't know, if there was a greasy handprint on the windshield, maybe the dust would stick to it or something. So when we get home and pull in the driveway in my house, there's a street light out front, and we went and looked at it. And it was a white handprint, bigger than both my husband's and my hand. The fingers are longer than proportionately for a human hand. You can look and see the palm marks, the ridges in the fingers and in the palm, and it looks like hair around. It was not huge like you think of like a Bigfoot, huge 8-foot thing. This was not a huge thing, but this was purposefully put there. This was like a high five. Mm-hmm. And my son, we woke him up when we got back because he works in the morning. I said, "You've got to come see this." He's like, "What?" He said, "Oh my gosh." So the next morning, I took photos of both the rearview mirror and the hand. The next morning, we did a little video of it. We made put a video together of me telling that story, and my daughter kind of put it together with the photos and close-ups and everything, and with the sound. So then the sound, I texted all my kids. We have a group text, and said what had happened, showed a picture of it, and said we heard this sound. And I looked up. I went on Google and looked up Northern Michigan owls and listened to all the indigenous owls, and it was none of those. And so my daughter Rachel shares a video with Sasquatch calls, and one of those is exactly what we heard. So is that part of the magic of this place? I, well, I suppose so.
Wow.
And it just like we're here, it's like
Yeah.
left for us. So, and I was able to lift the handprint with clear contact paper off of the car because it was supposed to rain that afternoon. So it's just, it was stunning. I'll share with you pictures of that. And the video, I have a YouTube channel where I tell ghost stories. And so the video of that is on my YouTube.
Brilliant. Yeah, that would be cool. I'll link it with
Good.
this episode. Wow. Yeah, I mean earlier when you talked about stones being thrown and things like that, I mean that it can be fae folk as well. Um, but it's very well known, obviously, that Sasquatch, that Sasquatch activity.
Yeah.
So did you have a sense it was more of a juvenile?
I felt that and there were other smaller prints on the car. I think it was more than one. And I think the whoop was to distract us because I think there was a juvenile nearby.
Mm.
And I think we made us freeze, but it wasn't threatening.
Mm.
There are reports of when you hear the call, it scares the heck out of you. You get this,
Red feeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
but not. It felt like a greeting or just a hey, and we stopped to listen for more. And then when the other one called, my son says that in the lore about here's the old man of the forest, um, and the indigenous folk talk about this being that has been here, since before human beings were here. Was the first people were not the first people, but in the lore that when you see or hear them, they are distracting you from the ones who are moving away. So he says that's probably what happened. But the handprint, this was not, I mean, it wasn't wet. Everything was dry. And it looks like it was like made of white clay. It looks like it was purposefully put there. It wasn't just, like fingerprints or a handprint that you'd have more than one. It wouldn't be just one hand right there in the middle of the windshield. It would have smeared. It would, if it was not on purpose, but it was like clay, like white clay. But the clay in the river there is red clay.
Oh, really?
I don't know what it is. But then again, at the bottom of the spring, it's white sand, so there must be white clays. So, I don't know. It's very iron. The soil here is very iron rich, and so everything is red. The stream is red. The clay
Makes
is
you,
red.
it makes you wonder whether your offerings, do you think they may have even, if you had your muffins with you?
And that was something else that Ezra said, that when you take something, I always bring pretty much the same thing, different breads, different honeys, stuff like that. Usually my son is a beekeeper, so it's his honey that we bring back, but bring back to nature. But this was like a special treat kind of thing. Plus, he said we were not acting like humans while we were there. We were not moving. We weren't talking. We weren't eating or drinking. We didn't build a fire. We were just being part of the stillness of the space, and we weren't. We did not impact it in any way. We were just there. And he said, when we do that, most time people can't do that for more than 15, 20 minutes, to sit without speaking and do nothing, just, not even a fidget. That it was an acknowledgement, he thinks, of us being part of that, and that perhaps we weren't the only ones that come there for the full moon. And maybe there's a gathering from all different places that come at full moons. And maybe it's all different kinds of beings through different gates. And there we all were experiencing this together. And he really feels like it was a gift of acknowledgement to us, an acknowledgement that we are here too, which makes me even more fervent for protection, because there are a lot of people that would like to find the people of the forest and why. When humans find things, it's so that we can use them somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's none of our business. If they're gracious enough to allow us to be part of it, and we them, then we just can be there in relationship. We don't have to prove anything. We don't have to learn anything. But to get a tangible sign that this is true, that this is real, is so powerful. It's so powerful.
It's really absolutely wonderful. I feel like yeah, the connection which you hold with these places, this is what we've forgotten. I talk about this all the time. This is what we as humanity have forgotten. And maybe when we have found our sense of humanity again as a world, maybe we will be able to treat these places with respect. But until then, I agree that they need to be kept, safe and secret because of the beings that reside there. Because we just don't seem to have, look what we've done to our waters in the world. Look what we've done to, these beautiful habitats all over the world. And so, yeah, anything that we can do to protect them is of the utmost importance. But what you're offering here is how it can be.
That's right.
And how it was before we turned into a bunch of Egypts and started disrespecting the world and each other in our ways.
It's also where I am in my life too, my life journey. Because 25, 30 years ago, I could not have experienced this because I was a mother. I wouldn't have time to sit in the forest alone. And there are times when I go on the cross quarters and bring the children because their energy is important there. But there are times I like to go alone too. And being an elder now, I am gifted with that opportunity. And I think that as we get, all of the frenzied things and the busied things fall away, and I'm a very busy person, I do many, many things, but I am gifted with the ability to be able to have that time to do nothing, to just be. And we are, we are programmed, especially in Western culture, to be doing. What is an idle mind is a devil's playground. That we're all taught, and it's like, no, an idle mind is a portal to everything. An openness where you're not trying to see anything, where I'm not looking for anything, where I'm not trying to even connect with anything, where I am at a place in my life where I can just be part of where I am. And this is something that when I was younger, I got sick when I was 13, 14 years old. When I was 15, it was misdiagnosed, and I was told I would not live through my 30s. And I've been in and out of wheelchairs. I've had multiple surgeries. Turns out it was misdiagnosed. And now I turned 70 in October. So I have this unplanned gift of being an old woman, an old person. And this was something that I rushed into spirit. I rushed into the other world to try to learn as much as I could at that time, because I didn't think I would be here for long. And when my peers were worried about whether they had a pimple on their face for a date on Friday night, I was thinking about what is the nature of the world I'm going to move into soon. What is around me when I couldn't run and play and go to places that my peers were able to do. I learned to spirit travel and go to places that they couldn't go, or go to places where they were too. And then expecting to not have all that experience and learning to carry into my crondom, my dotage, as my mother used to call it. And now I am so blessed. I've had all these experiences and all these gifts that I've amassed and learned from. And now I'm in a place in my life where I can sit for 90 minutes and do nothing and be perfectly, perfectly content. It's such a gift. I pray everyone find that space. You know, if your life is busy now, learn everything you can from your busy life now. But pay attention to what's going on beyond your busy life. Pay attention to all the other life that's going on beyond the physical life. And then when things slow down and you have time, and you're a grandmother, whether you are a grandmother to human beings, but we are all grandmothers at some point, like the trees are the grandmothers, then we can help share it and pass it on. And also have the blessing of it giving to us, giving back to us, preparing us for when we fully become part of spirit and part of the earth, right?
I couldn't say it better than that. And I think that is such a beautiful wish for the world. I so appreciate the stories that you've shared this evening and just such wisdom. And yeah, I'm very moved by the way that you've lived your life and been so close to the other worlds. And your relationship with water really seems to come through in all of this. It's just utterly beautiful. Thank you for passing this on. I'm delighted that your children are out there living and knowing, the same things that you've passed on to them, and also your grandchildren, because that's another generation now that it's going to go down to more generations. So I really do hope that you manage to get to speak to your cousins and have that exchange of of their way of life too, and
Yes.
that is able to to lead on to something even greater. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that unfurls. So keep me posted with that. And just so much, Tiyi. It's been an absolute honor. And hats off to you with all that you are giving to the world. And it's been, every time I've spoken to you, I've really learned a lot. You give so much, and I'm glad that you're getting this time now to just be and enjoy what's coming back to you from nature, because it feels like now nature is reaching out to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do. And there are people who are learning how to connect through you. You are such an important voice in making sure that the lore, and the lore is the teacher. The lore is what's passed down, and the mindfulness. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, I think we're moving into rougher times, but we're moving into better times beyond that. I don't know if I'm going to live to the better times, but it's we're at probably the transition birthing stage at this point. Things are
really
painful and messy, but I have every confidence, and I see it in the woman on the other side of the gate who raised her hand. We are all here. We are all here.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Thank you. Thank you. It's so striking an image. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Tiyi. And
Thank you.
and yes, we will speak again soon. And I would love to share your channel with folks too. So I will be doing that. In fact, do you have a way that people can contact you, or that you want people to get in touch?
Yes, I have a website too.
Yeah.
And I have, my website is just Spooky Ms. Tims, Tiyi. And on there, there's links to all my things, my books. There are links to my poetry. There's so much. I write a poem a day and I post those. I have a Substack with my poetry. And so there's the website has pretty much everything. And I sometimes keep it up to date.
Well, I'm
But
glad you're being rather than the doing. Because if you're
yes,
doing, then you're not being.
that's right.
Keep
That's
doing
right.
being.
That's right. It's nice to not have a real day job. Of course, being mayor is kind of a day job, but
Yeah.
it's not every day. But so I can put more of this in, and I'm only doing that till December, and then I'm really so. Then I begin my 70th year, my 71st year, actually. Then
Okay.
with that other stuff falling away.
I mean, could every town in the world have a mayor like you, please? That's my wish. Um,
There are those who would not say that. But
well,
I'm grateful that you feel that way, and
I hope that's the future.
be nice. Well,
Yeah.
I bring my sensibilities to that and a gentleness, So
Yeah. Well, it's really been an honor. Thank you, Ti.
thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/The Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.